17, 2025. Counselor Andrews.
Here.
Waltney.
Here.
Wolverton.
Here.
Sims.
Here.
Nelms.
Here.
Full
Okay,
house.
full house. We're all here. I will begin with a motion to dismiss the reading and approve the minutes from February 17th.
So moved.
Second.
Nelms with the motion, Gwaltney with the second. All those in favor? Aye. Only heard me and Andy.
Aye.
Alright, everybody? Delete, yes. Wolverton, yes. Okay, that passes 5-0. Alright, old business 120225, request for consideration to rezone property at 101 to 109 Hughes Circle consisting of 9 residential lots and comprising 7.07 acres. From Mr. Smith, we have carried this item over. We're going to continue to carry this item over without objection. And same with the next item, 130225, request for consideration of a final development plan for property at 109 Hughes Circle consisting of 9 residential lots, including Hughes Circle right of way and comprising 7.07 acres. Without objection, we will carry that item over.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have is there a public hearing that we have to set on that? What are we carrying it over for?
Well, we need to hear what, I mean, we are not on the clock right now, so until we have heard from the.
I'm sorry, I was having another conversation. We
About
talked
the Hughes Circle.
The Hughes Circle.
Yeah, we don't need,
We're not on the
we
clock
should
right
not
now.
set a public hearing yet. They're
Working
still
through
working on that.
issues, yes, so, no.
Will they
It will
have,
require a public hearing.
Yeah.
will they have to go back to planning commission
No.
if they're still working on changing
That
something?
depends on
Depends
if
on how much they
something.
change.
I don't know if they're gonna change something or not, or if those changes would be considered substantial.
They themselves are in a holding pattern trying to
They
figure
are
it
in
out.
a
They are working with the neighbors to potentially, we'll see. So we are not on the clock for that item. We're gonna carry that over without objection. New business 070325, request to repeal the sign ordinance and repeal and replace the zoning ordinance. Here we are. Where's Carlos?
He left.
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
Okay, Walter and Carlos, here we are. Here we are. It is March 17th, 2025. Boom. All right, Mr. Smith.
All right, Brian. You guys remember this and know this, but what we did was in January 24, we repealed and replaced the zoning ordinance, and then from you wanted to move the sign ordinance over into it. So we started working last summer, talked about what was wrong and what was right with the sign ordinance. We had a working group, and then we went to planning commission with all of these things in December, and then we had to get some of the formatting right, and so we're here now. I'm going to go through all of the changes that we made in what I call the regular part of the zoning ordinance, and then at the end we'll talk about the sign part of the zoning ordinance. We did make some pretty significant revisions to the regular zoning ordinance based on conversations that we've had with lots of folks over the past year after we made the 2024 revisions. So what you see here is in blue is text that I wrote, and then most of the stuff in red is actually found in the new zoning ordinance. New definitions, amenities, boundary survey, courtyard, hotel, motel, personal services are all new definitions. And then we revised artificial turf. And I'm going to talk about some of these in a minute. I'm going to skip amenities for right now. I'm going to talk about boundary surveys. So what we see a lot of upstairs is folks who want to build a fence, and they want to provide us with like a tax map or a parcel ID map that they download from Jefferson County, and they just draw lines on it. And the same goes for like a driveway expansion. For us to be able to regulate all the things that are required to be regulated by ordinance, like impervious areas and that kind of thing, we have to have a boundary survey. So this requires a boundary survey for really any improvements. And then we list out here what those improvements are. I'll talk about a courtyard. We've seen this 2 or 3 times in the past 3 years where a homeowner wants to build what I call a courtyard swimming pool. But right now you're currently only allowed to build a swimming pool in the rear yard. We consider this a side yard. So we made a definition of courtyard, which means that the pool is actually inside the 4 walls of the house. And so this would be, a pool inside the courtyard would be allowed.
Oh, good, for my next house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
This is come forward.
Is that still 25%
I'll ask you.
or smaller?
Permeable on the one?
For the,
What do you mean?
does the pool size have to be 25% or smaller than
The pool is considered
Footprint
an
of the house.
accessory structure, and accessory structures are 25% or less.
Okay.
Yep. We added definitions for personal services. We just listed those out. We allow personal services in some zoning districts, but now we define what they are. We clarified intent, continuance, modifications to non-conforming uses and structures. I'm not going to talk much about that. All right, here's another one that I know Councilor Gwaltney and Alex and I talked about for a long time. We clarified the intent of the maximum building height of detached dwellings in the NPD zoning district. So Andy and I talked for a long time about what problems we were trying to solve, and I went around and around, but it wasn't until they explained what the intent was when this got changed 5 or 6 years ago that I really understood what needed to happen. So what it is what the intent was that you can build the peak of your roof from the existing grade, not from the proposed grade, pre-construction, right? But we don't get topographical surveys for all new houses, so we don't know what that existing grade is. So all we know is what gets submitted to us currently, which shows a grade, which could be a bunch of fill material or a bunch of excavation, whatever. So this requires for new construction an existing topographical survey
Before they start moving dirt.
before they start moving dirt.
Thank
Yeah.
y'all very much.
And that's,
Andy.
what is that,
How,
extra?
how do we ensure they haven't
1,000?
moved dirt
2,000.
before
Ish.
they send it to us?
2,000.
Yeah, can't move dirt without a permit.
Yeah, you can't move dirt without a permit.
So how do we know? You can or cannot?
Cannot.
You
You
can't.
gotta get a grading
And
permit.
you can't get the permit until you submit this.
Right. Now, this doesn't prevent them from bringing in a bunch of fill material and still building their house up, but the peak roof is going to be measured from that existing grade at the front foundation wall. Does that make
You mean
sense?
Before they ever touch the property.
Yes.
So in essence, this is capping crawl spaces at 3 feet. Well, 3 feet for 55 foot less. Is it 3 feet on the next one too? Yes, 3 feet of that one as well. Which is what the intent of the ordinance was trying to do.
And I don't mean to make this last longer than it needs to, but for that situation that brought this discussion to the forefront, could they have come in and made that lot as high and filled it in as far in the front as it looks like they're doing with that undercurrent zoning? You know, the Irving Street.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it looks like they're coming up
13
6,
feet.
8, 10 feet from the original, how far,
I think it's 13, isn't it?
So would they have been able to make that big hill in front of their house with our current zoning?
In the current zoning, yes. They're within the zone, I mean, yeah, they
How
got
does
approval
that-
and all that.
how-
Because we didn't require a map, so we didn't.
But
so
but
they
I mean,
changed
how
the grade.
is it gonna fit in with the neighbor lot?
It's
I mean,
not.
that's my one, that's what
That's
I'm
one of the,
wondering.
that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
There are spots around the city where you've got land going like this and then a lot like this. And they're doing exactly what Cale just described. The existing
Yeah, but I
topography
mean,
is this way,
well, I
and
guess
someone's building this one lot up, and so you can tell it's higher
to
than
me,
the
there,
ones on
it
either
seems
side.
like there's a little bit of, I mean, I don't know, but it wouldn't be good if they could still build their lot up, that, it's a corner lot, that much higher than their lot next to them, because there's a lot of runoff problems that occur with neighboring lots, and maybe that's not a discussion here, but we did have, in that same area, when there were lots that were divided, and they built new houses next to small houses, and the new lot was a good bit higher than the surrounding houses, it caused a lot of damage, and I don't know.
I think you're raising a legitimate point. What, from a practical standpoint, is probably unlikely to occur, because as you build it up, what you're doing is you're shrinking the house, because you still can't go over the cap is still the same.
Okay.
So instead of, if you build it up, for example, if you build it up 8
So if
feet,
they had
then
done
that
this
house just lost
correctly,
a story.
they wouldn't have wanted,
Well, and
If this were.
I know what you're talking about, and I think what's been done since then was before your time. What we've done is to address that situation was we weren't requiring, I forget what you guys call it, basically, but you can't shed your, we could said that
Shed
before,
water.
you can't shed your water in your neighbor's property.
Correct.
Y'all are actually checking that now to ensure that they're detaining or,
Correct.
you know,
We
sending out to the
require
city
an
property. Right.
engineering-
That's right. So that's
Okay.
the
So
engineering
even-
requirements that they have now, and I'm not getting the right words,
Okay.
solve for that problem, because
Okay.
that was a big issue
Okay.
over there.
So if we have a big lot, a big difference, they will have to solve the problem of runoff to
They have
their
to make it
neighbors.
water neutral.
Oh, for sure,
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
Because
have
we
to
had to
have
build
a
that
detention
drain
pond or a
at the
retention
bottom of the.
system.
Okay.
Just all
Okay,
that.
thank you, sorry to add that, okay.
Lots of money.
All right. Artificial turf. So this section was written because our current tree and landscape ordinance prohibits artificial turf from being in the front yards anywhere. But in some places, amenity areas make sense. So if you think of an apartment complex who may have a dog park in the side yard and they want to put in turf, now they're going to be able to do that. Well, this was, I know JJ at the edge wanted to put in artificial turf in the front, in the part closer to Green Springs, and he wasn't allowed to do it. So under this, he would be allowed to put turf in the dining area. So that's that one.
And that's just for businesses, that's not gonna affect.
For attached residential, you can put artificial turf in amenity areas,
Yeah.
and for non-residential districts.
Okay, so
What's
no
the
residents,
minimum?
we're still prohibiting.
Right,
it
no
for-
front yard.
You can put
So
it in the
you,
backyard.
you can do it in the backyard or do like a
Backyard.
golf thing,
That's right.
whatever, but you just can't put it in your front yard. Got it.
Right.
Okay. Makes sense.
Does
Uh,
sorry,
yep.
Cale, does it say specifically no front yards
Yes.
in there, or?
No, it does.
It does? or
Yeah,
doesn't?
right here, detached
Yeah, yeah.
residential, and detached residential artificial turf shall be permitted in rear yards only.
Okay. So that would exclude side yards, or, I guess I'm just thinking of the fence ordinance where you can build up to the front of the home
But
for a
this is not-
backyard fence. Does that make sense?
So in residential districts, you can only put them in the rear yard. You can only put artificial turf in the rear yards.
Okay.
You can't run it up the sides to the like front porch.
You can't.
Well,
run it up
that's
the
what I was
sides.
trying to get at, was a backyard fence by the current ordinance, I believe, would be allowed to the front.
To
front
tie
edge
into
of
the front of the house, sure.
So
Yep.
that could be basically on the side yard of the house if it's fenced, or,
Nope, it can't be. It's allowed only in the rear yard.
That's for water.
But they could go ask for a variance.
They
If
could
just
ask
have
for
a
a variance.
fence and they said, hey, it's gonna be behind a fence, hey BZA, can I get a variance for this?
Yeah, and the BZA would do it.
gotcha.
Okay, go ahead.
Not us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not us.
Y'all call Berkeley if you need that.
Amenities for attached dwelling districts, one of the, so think like R5, R6, R7, we allow health clubs, fitness studios, gyms, swimming pools, dog washing stations in attached multifamily developments. But if you build an apartment complex and you have a dog washing station in it or a health club in there, you can't charge memberships for people you can't build an apartment complex for Andy to come over and wash the dog and then him pay you money. So this just cleans that up. Where that was a little bit gray before.
But you can charge the residents that money, right?
Yeah, the residents, I mean, that's up to them. Yeah.
You can't have outside people.
Right, you can't have outside people who don't live there using that amenity. Special rules for vehicle sales lots. If you think West Valley, we have a lot of vehicle sales lots along that corridor, and most of them are pretty small, and they're just vehicles everywhere.
Yeah.
So we're trying to, in an attempt to clean some of that up, we restrict vehicle sales lots to
If you
C5
think
and M1.
West
Valley, we
sites
have
that
are larger than 3 acres. And then there are all these other design criteria that you have to meet, development plans, that kind of stuff.
Can we add auto repair to that?
Not easily.
Okay.
Mechanical and electrical appurtenances, we see a lot of generators and solar panels and pool equipment now. We're just cleaning up the language for that. So you can put those things on the side, in the side yard within 2 feet of the property line, if they're not taller than 5 feet. Irrigation, this was the requirement for irrigation was kind of buried in the tree and landscape ordinance, and so we're just moving it to a more prominent spot. None of this language changes, so. Going through all of, I mean, you can go through this 1,000 times, and every single time you're gonna find something wrong. In putting this together, I found this one thing wrong, so if you move it out tonight, please clean this up, remember this.
Yes, sir.
In the existing food and beverage parking section of the ordinance, you are allowed, or you have to have 4 stacking spaces at the drive-through window. But in our new definition of what's in front of you tonight, we say that you gotta have 5. So we just boogered that up. So we just need you to change the 5 here in the definition to 4.
It
Yes,
should say 4.
it should say 4.
So they just need 4 stacking.
They just need 4
Place it
stacking.
in the
That's right.
drive-through.
All right. Before we move on to signs, any questions about the zoning part of it?
I love this part. This part's the best part.
Yeah, this is the best part. All right, signs. We talked a lot about signs with Wyatt, and I know some of you folks, Carlos. Really what we determined was that the sign ordinance was pretty solid, that there wasn't a whole lot wrong with it. We did change some things though, and I'm gonna walk through those changes quickly. One is move definitions from the end of it to the front of it. Updated prohibited signs to include billboards, so no billboards anymore. And rope style lights, like you see LED rope lights around windows, that's prohibited now.
And we can't get rid of billboards that are
No.
in
They're
bad
grandfathered
places
in
until when, forever, or?
until they change them. If they take them down, that's when they can't put them back up.
Or if they're defunct or not in use for 6 months.
Yeah.
What about pole signs?
Same.
Someone-
Gone.
Same.
Yeah, but you can't, you got
can't read.
grandfathered in, right?
They got grandfathered in.
Unless they do substantial.
You can change the panel, but that's all you can do.
Yeah. If you,
If the business goes under for more than 6 months, it has
Yeah.
to be.
Like when Valley Cleaners moved out from where
Or
they
change in
exist.
business.
Or
Has to
if,
be
I
removed.
presume like when Cameron's Corner is gonna do a whole big renovation, that pole sign's gonna come down. Cause that's
Right,
gonna be a
but-
whole,
But I had someone approach me the other day, and said the city was telling them that they don't even get the right of grandfathered in. I kept meaning to call Wyatt and ask him, but.
As long as they believe it.
yeah.
That's all that matters.
Is it a change in
They're-
business?
No, they're not doing anything that I know of. I'm just, and I said, I need to check. I
Oh,
don't know
Lord.
the answer to that, but I.
Yeah, we'd love to talk to him, John. Just
Yeah.
send them our way.
Yep.
Updated admin and enforcement sections, added the allowance of non-residential temp signs with restrictions. I want to talk about this. We talked a lot about this in planning commission. Talk about yard signs, residential yard signs first. So you can have 2 temporary yard signs in your front yard. So I can have Andy Gwaltney for mayor and Jennifer Andrus and Jennifer Andrus for mayor, but I can't also have a Pancake Day sign in my front yard. You are only allowed 2.
now who's gonna enforce that?
Oh,
Scott Cook, you'd be surprised how many
Yeah.
temporary signs he pulls up. And then the other one, which we talked a lot about, is for non-residential districts, so downtown district. The real estate signs, sorry. Those currently were not allowed, now they are allowed, based on feedback that we received by listening to you all in the past year.
But things like
Are
those.
they allowed in the city right away, though?
Those extra flags and those kind of things aren't allowed.
What are flags?
You know, like
Banners,
those
like
big
that.
banner things that they put up, like the.
those aren't allowed.
Those
Those are
are
not.
The
allowed.
vertical
Okay.
banner flags,
Yeah.
yeah.
Blazes.
Clarify
When you say, real estate signs,
Mhm.
Right.
define that for me.
Property signs.
Space
Property
available.
management signs?
Property management signs, space available for sale.
But
What
the-
about just their sign on a property that they own? Sorry.
No, that's where I'm going.
Say,
Like
what
a
does
sign,
that
their
mean?
name on a property that they own, but it's not,
There's nothing for rent.
nothing
per se.
happening that
Yeah,
they're trying
just
to
marketing.
advertise.
We can't regulate content.
It's not the content. It's an additional sign, and they're not coming before us to get approval for it, technically. So it's technically a violation of the sign ordinance. A property management sign that's like out by the street,
I think what Andy's saying is that if there's nothing actually for sale or for
Right.
rent, then it's not falling within the use of the sign that's permitted.
Sure, but we can't regulate content.
I understand. I guess what I'm saying is,
But the sign's not
isn't it
permissible.
two different uses? Isn't one an advertising sign and one a sign advertising sale or rent?
It would say, so it doesn't matter if it says property for sale or Andy Gwaltney for mayor. It's still the same sign type.
But it's temporary then, so then he's saying they're not prohibited today. I mean, they're not allowed today. So
Right.
they're prohibited. Perfect.
Okay.
I've got a
That-
whole
that-
list for
yeah.
Scott.
But we're proposing
Scott, you better
for
stop.
them to be allowed.
Did you hear that?
Okay, well, I think that's what
He's
Andy's
proposing
saying,
to
is
allow
if you're allowing them
No.
for the purpose of advertising a sale or rent of property,
Is
then
there
that's
any
what's
temporary
allowed.
license?
So if someone puts a sign out that just says, we're managing the property and it's permanent,
What
and
is
it's left out there
temporary?
forever, but there's nothing for sale or rent associated with that property,
definition, too.
is that a permitted use of that sign?
Under this, it will be, yes.
Okay, Cale,
How
could
are
I
you
ask for
to
clarification
determine-
too then? What, it says temporary non-residential yard sign, but then further it goes on to say without time limitation.
Right.
So it's temporary based in the fact that you can just put it in the ground and out of the ground quite easily, but it can be there in
Indefinitely.
perpetuity regardless of relating to a given time limited event, and
Yes.
so on, so forth. Okay. So just to the very point that y'all are making then, you said you can't regulate content, but in that case then, if you're advertising for rental or for lease, that's one situation based on availability, but if you're just giving the company that is the real estate company with no availability, then isn't that an off-premise sign?
An off-premise sign is a different sign type.
Okay.
An off-premise sign is a billboard.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what I was thinking is, it, to me, it essentially becomes a billboard, but like, you know, a sign
Right.
So if I want to
off-premise,
put,
so I would think it would be excluded.
if I want to put Jody Brandt First Lenders Mortgage, 2 signs in my front yard,
At your house?
yeah,
Okay.
I'm good.
You're good.
3 signs, not so good.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I was trying to particularly talk about F, which is non-residential.
Right. You're talking about the non-residential
Yes.
one. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of allowing those.
Well, this is, I mean, you remember this conversation.
I do remember this
Yeah, and you
conversation.
remember-
I think what we were talking about was different than what I think Andy and Melanie are talking about. What we were talking about is, hey, there's this piece of land that's for sale, or there's this building where I'm renting out 5,000 square feet.
Sure.
I think what they're talking about is when someone is taking advantage of that and the building's full, and they leave their sign out and say,
It's their name on
it
it.
has their name on it.
Right.
How is that sign not an extra business sign? Because it has nothing to do with anything that's for sale or rent.
If it's on a piece of plywood and it's painted and it's on 2 posts, then that's considered a temporary sign.
Okay, but so I think that's what they're saying is, we have signs around the city where that is being used as a permanent sign.
Sure.
Regardless of whether there's something that there is for sale or rent, that sign, if it's temporary, should have a limit so that someone can come get rid of it.
Is
It
there
is
a
not
time?
associated with a sale or rent.
The problem
we
with
set a
the
time
time limit is like, when does the clock, because they're not permitted, right? You can go and put an Andy Gwaltner for governor sign out anytime.
Man, you
The
just gotta-
clock-
you just gotta
but the clock
enforce it.
doesn't start, at what point does the clock start?
I understand. I guess what I'm saying
For mayor to
is,
go.
why does the fact that it's on plywood and put in the ground not make it an extra business sign
Yeah.
than any other sign that's associated with something that is going on in that building?
So we can't regulate what's on the sign, the content.
Right.
And because of
Where's my kid?
the sign type, that makes it the sign type. It doesn't matter if it says 5,000 square feet for lease or Alex Wyatt, right?
I think it does, is what I'm saying. I
Because of
agree.
what? Why? Because of the content?
because of the purpose of the sign. If I'm using the sign to promote my business, that is a sign that is just an extra sign to whatever sign is on my business. So in other words, if I have a business and it's in a building, and I've complied with the sign ordinance, I've got the signs that are allowed, whatever those are, and then I decide to put an extra sign in the yard that's made of wood, now suddenly I get an extra sign.
It says like McDonald's on it.
Yeah, this is the same thing as my signs for my business.
Right.
Yeah. Why do I get an extra sign in that circumstance?
That's
Yeah.
it. I don't know. I understand what you're saying now. I don't know the answer.
And I would throw out, you don't have that many of those. But I do, being in the business of this, I do think that people put a sign out, I know some of them, and they just leave it out while the building's full, but if you go to them, they say, well, we have a lease coming up in 3 months, we don't know if they're gonna renew or not, and so I think it'd be very hard to regulate.
I agree that it's hard to regulate.
Well,
I think.
And I think the issue too is that the current ordinance prohibits that situation, and it still exists, and this would make it legal, and I think it would become more widespread. And I don't,
Who
I don't.
wanted that?
Well, the point was
Well,
to be
I
able to
think
say
it's-
there's space available. Where
Right,
you know,
the
that's
issue was that
point.
the existing ordinance does not, technically does not allow you to advertise that there's space available or land for sale.
Okay.
And there was an understanding of why that was needed, right? If you legitimately are selling a piece of land, you want to be able to put up a sign, and that's fine. I think
As
what we're
opposed-
struggling with is where to draw the line between that and I've got a bunch of signs around town that are advertising my business simply because I happen to manage a bunch of properties.
Or you have something like the Edgewood Strip, where you have all the buildings owned by different owners. If they all want to put their placard on the front of the building, it looks ridiculous.
Yep.
So,
And developers who are maybe about to develop a piece of property in the next X number of years, and they just put a big, huge sign on that property for ever.
Well, they can't put any bigger than what we allow.
Well, I thought we had asked them to take them down, and there's another one. I don't think they came to us. We don't allow the one on 18th Street.
You don't have to come to us, do you? But do you have to have temporary, is there regulations on how big those temporary signs can be?
Yes.
That's what I thought,
Anyway.
But anyway,
Well,
that's
currently
what
they're
we're
not allowed,
struggling with.
period. That's the problem.
And I think we all see that there is a legitimate use in one circumstance and that what we're trying to do is prevent abuse of that by taking advantage of that potential use.
Well, how do we address that where we are now?
I'm not real sure.
we could probably,
We probably need to talk with Mr.
Right.
Kendrick about it.
So
I'm not convinced that that is regulating content. Now, I'd want to talk to Mike about that, but I'm not convinced that the use of the sign is regulating content.
Okay. I told Wyatt he couldn't leave.
well played, well played.
So
Wyatt said you could do
do
it,
you,
right?
do you want to go through the rest of it,
Yeah, I don't
Dale?
think this is, so all these changes are phenomenal. I don't think this is
Agreed.
derailing what you've got.
Right.
We've got time, so.
So do you want to go through the
Yeah.
rest of what we're
I like
doing
that
and then
section.
carry this
Yeah.
over?
Mike, I think Mike wants to say something.
Oh, is he with us? Mike?
If you have to read the sign for its regulation, it's prohibited.
If you have,
Best-
Mike, just make sure I heard you. If you have to read the sign to enforce it, it's prohibited?
Correct.
If you have
Because
to,
that means
in
it's
other words,
based
if
on
the
the content.
information on the sign is
Yeah.
what makes it prohibited,
Then
or
What makes
makes
it,
you determine whether or not it's prohibited, then it's content. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So, Cale,
hey, Mike?
Yeah, hope you're feeling well,
Hey.
better, improving.
I'm here.
Is he tomorrow or
Today.
Today.
So Mike agreed with what I said. That's
Yeah,
what
you
I-
can't.
Okay.
You just got the
So
thumbs
now
up.
we
it is
go
content.
back to, which we can't regulate, so now we go back to, we're now allowing this type of signage, because we need to allow a business to say we have space available.
That's up to you.
That's what we,
the question
that's what we
is.
all,
Right.
that's what we arrived at when we sent it out in the first place, when we sent it to.
Why don't you have this? Why don't you say you can have one sign You can have one additional sign when you have lease available. When you have space available.
You can only put a for lease sign out when you actually have something available. Does that capture all of them then?
How do you regulate that?
You gotta have space available.
You gotta have space available, not space
I
available
got
in
a
3
list.
months.
Right.
Deputy Andy.
Space has to be available then.
I mean, all of it's a regulatory nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that, potential that I would throw out there, and I don't remember what the sizes for these signs are. You make these signs smaller than what are currently allowed. In other words, you can make it like a yard
Like a
sign,
yard sign.
an actual yard sign, and make that for non-residential use as well, so that we don't end up with these plywood signs. And if someone wants to stick, you know,
That's a good
Well,
point.
we already have a 4x4 max. Am I right?
No,
we
there's
don't
one
allow
there.
it.
32 feet.
Yeah, yeah.
You get an
4x8.
8x4. Yeah. John, that's what you said, those real estate signs.
You got a big
Come get me. Yeah. Okay.
but yeah, I mean, you could, we could reduce the size where it probably makes it less advantageous to have a big sign out there or have a sign out there at all because it's not effective.
Is that a major change that sends us back to the planning commission?
I think probably so.
It would send that back to the planning.
I don't think it would.
You don't think it
Oh,
would?
Mike says no.
I don't think so.
Mike is just
That's
shooting
your-
everything y'all say now.
Mike's
That's
not
y'all's
even
call, but I don't think that's.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe
Yeah,
just use it.
typically, I think most people either do 4x4.
I mean, we could do the yard signs like political signs that exist. I mean, you can make it whatever you want, but yes, I think we could change the size that would at least give, because I think that's the biggest problem, right? It's not that there are little signs out at places. It's those big plywood signs that are up all over the place, or at least too many places, and seem to stay there. And so if we reduce the size that's allowed, if we don't think that those signs are needed even when land is for sale, or and I get like out in the country, if you're in a rural area, you may need a big sign like that because you're selling thousands and thousands of acres. In Homewood, I'm not sure you need the great big plywood signs.
All right.
You need something.
So,
Obviously, you
so
gotta
Need
go to-
something, but I think you can effectively advertise what's for sale or rent with a smaller sign.
so
What
when
we have up there is 15 feet height too, so, do something like a 4 foot by 4 foot square, no higher than 6 feet tall.
so right now we've got two things to change to what's here. That's not substantial changing. So when the motion gets made, those two changes need to be made if the committee agrees.
And that, is the first one being the
The
drive-through?
first one's a drive-through
Okay.
with 4 SAC parking.
Yeah.
I got that.
Okay. The second one's temporary signs. If that's what the committee agrees to. Okay.
Is there,
Let's keep moving on.
there's no desire to put a time limit on it, so the signage.
Did you ever see
Uh,
You can't, there's no, since they don't have to permit it, there's no starting of the clock.
I mean,
I feel like goes around
I guess
like
I'm just
kissing
thinking like
people and
Scott
licking
Cook
them.
drives by right now and sees a house with broken, busted out windows or this or that. I mean, we have people in the community, that work for the city that if they see a sign, I don't know. If they see one that's there and it stays there for 6 months or a year and it's not relevant to advertising something, do you see what I'm saying?
Without a sign permit, you can't regulate.
And I guess
Just to regulate the time.
To further clarify, we're not allowing, are we allowing signs in the city right of way? Because we get real estate signs and all sorts of stuff that gets thrown out there all the time.
Absolutely not.
So that would not change.
That would,
So fun.
no.
Okay, let's move on.
Alright.
Okay, moving on. Sorry. Time to go. Moving along.
Oh, this is new. A sign code exception. So like if somebody wants to come, if they want to put up a wall sign and in Edgewood, for example, and all the signs in Edgewood are non-conforming, if they want to match those signs and it's a 10% increase in area or I think or sign height or sign area, then we can allow that to happen administratively.
You don't
Oh,
have
yeah,
to send it
don't-
through.
You don't have to
Or the
send it through the
BZA.
BZA, right?
Yeah.
So we get 10% wiggle room. And if we're not, and if it's 8% increase and we're not comfortable with it because it doesn't meet the intent of the neighborhood or whatever, then we'll take it to BZA. A master sign plan is, so like Brookwood, for example, when they redevelop, they would bring a master sign plan, and they get more signs allowed, but it would be like a development plan, except a sign plan.
Does that same thing go for, like, for instance, the store, or whatever that place was, up in the front of Wildwood that had all the signs? Would that be even for businesses that size, or would these just be for the larger?
It would be for the larger
Okay.
sites, with a cumulative area of
Oh,
300,000
okay,
square
okay,
feet.
yeah. So for your Brookwoods and.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
real- yeah.
Okay,
And we want to encourage that to
sure,
happen.
yeah.
We moved everything that said Brookwood Mall in it. There was a whole section for Brookwood
Just
Mall, and we
Brookwood.
just took it all
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
Add an allowance for wall-mounted signs on the secondary facade, so like corner lots, like the boxing
Yes.
place gets a sign on the side now that's
Without
half
having
the
to come through the
size.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Multi-level buildings with multiple tenant allowance. So if you're the main tenant, you get a full-size wall sign.
Yeah.
If you're a secondary tenant and you have an entrance from the outside, then you get another wall sign that's half the size.
So like, for instance, that would apply to the St. Vincent's Clinic over there on Green Springs that has all the bazillion signs.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we prohibit internal illumination
Oh, really?
in downtown,
Totally.
totally. So there's no variance
We
request
already
for,
had that,
huh?
didn't we? We already had that in there, didn't we?
But they
Probably,
were-
but you.
But we were allowing it by
given a lot of
variance.
Yeah, we were
variances
allowing
because they were
variance.
already there, and so then the
Yeah.
neighbor had one, then why
The
can't I have
intention,
one?
I remember when, wasn't it Placemakers that
Mhm.
worked with us? The
Mhm.
intention was to move in the direction we wanted it to go.
But then we got, like, some bank comes forward and they're like, name 4 other banks that have internal lighting, then we couldn't
And
feel
then
like we could deny that to them. That's what happened, you know?
Did the street lights in the canopy go away? Because they're eliminating the edge of the
It
building.
says internal illumination, oh, no, it
What
says
canopy?
internal.
You just gave me gonna de-rustify.
Derostify.
That's all, y'all. You got 2 changes, I think, that we've made.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Okay, so the motion needs to set the public hearing as well.
I
President
think it's gonna be
Jones?
set on the 31st.
Okay, so we'll set it on 31st. So we could go ahead and move all of this out, the changes to the zoning ordinance with the definitions and the sign ordinance with the 2, and moving the sign ordinance to the, am I saying all this right? Moving the sign ordinance to the, zoning ordinance, with those 2 changes.
Well, we've got to, I'm sorry, maybe you just said this, we got to set
March
the public.
31st, we're gonna set it on March 31st.
We'll set it,
We'll set
but
it,
not for
so-
the public hearing to be March 31st, obviously, right?
Correct.
Yes,
We will
thanks,
set the
sorry.
public hearing on March 1st. So sending it out, did I make that, was that clear, the way I said that? Okay.
Yes.
It was, I was just
Yeah,
asking
well, I
clarification.
wasn't
Thank you.
sure. I was asking myself if that was clear. Yeah, so, yeah, good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, all right. Anyone with that motion?
I'll make that motion for approval, pending the public hearing.
Okay. Baltney Wolverton?
Yeah.
Okay, and so just to reiterate, Mr. Segrist, that's with 4 stacking parking spaces with drive-through, and that's temporary signs, or the change to that is the size goes down to 4x4s.
Got it.
Okay.
With the height,
With the height, yeah.
A
maximum.
height of 6 feet.
Nice.
I heard somebody say 6
Or
feet. Is
five.
that what y'all decided?
Or
Height of 6.
Okay.
That's good to me.
Better,
Well,
much better.
Mardi Gras.
Okay, so I have a
Mardi Gras.
motion from Counselor Waltney and a second from Counselor Wolverton. All those in favor say aye.
I have one question.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I mean, it was just the time for discussion before the vote, just to clarify. So this is gonna go
Yes.
to council to set the public hearing on the
Yes.
31st. Can we get a draft of the revisions so that by the time we set the public hearing on the 31st, we have the revised draft?
With the 2 changes?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I'd like to see the draft so that when we set the public hearing, we can see exactly what the language is.
You did get the red line copy though, right?
I mean,
did.
yeah.
It's been a while.
It's been a
yeah,
while.
I have it from you.
Okay.
But yes, correct. With those 2 changes, yes.
We'll
Okay.
get you those 2 changes and we'll send that out to the full council.
That would be great. All right, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
y'all.
Thanks.
080325, request for consideration to rezone property at 8 Bonita Drive from NPD to C2 to permit construction of a 2-story medical office clinic building. This is brought to us from, the planning commission had a vote of 0 to 5 for an unfavorable recommendation. This was coming to us from Keith and Laura Stansel. I will entertain a motion to drop this item.
Motion to drop.
Okay.
Second.
All right, motion from Counselor Gwaltney, second from Counselor Sims. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. Oh, 4-0?
Four, yeah.
Oh, no, he
Andrew.
isn't.
No, no, he's over
Okay,
there.
I thought
You
he
to
was out
vote,
there.
you gave me a vote, 5-0? Okay, 5-0. All right,
I thought he left.
without
Sorry.
further, what's the word?
Any further discussion?
Any
We're
further
adjourned.
discussion? Without any,
Second on that one.
what's the word? Anyway, we adjourned.